Hello and welcome back to the Launchpad at AWS reInvent 2019. I'm Steve, Senior Technical Evangelist at AWS, and I'm joined with my co-host Nikki and some special guests to talk about this morning's announcement of spot pricing on AWS Fargate. So before we get started, why don't we go down the line and introduce yourselves?
Sure, my name is Chad Schmutzer. I'm a Principal Developer Advocate for the EC2 Spot team.
Hey, my name is Akshay Ram. I'm a Product Manager with AWS Fargate.
Hi, Twitch. I hope you miss me as much as I miss you today. Anyways, we're back. Talking about an awesome launch I'm really excited about. So first, let's start out by telling everybody what spot pricing really is, and then we can talk about today's launch.
We have the spot expert here, so
Yeah, Chad, tell us about spot pricing.
Spot is spare capacity in the AWS cloud. And so what we've done today is unlocked that spare capacity to be used with a fantastic service called Fargate. And I'll let you talk about what Fargate is here a little bit.
Yeah, so I think so when customers started using Fargate, they liked the serverless operation model, and as more and more customers started moving my applications over, they were like, hey, we run these applications that are fault tolerant, and we currently run them on EC2 Spot. We want to go serverless, but how do we do that? And we went back to the drawing board, and we're like, you know what, how do we marry these two worlds in terms of a very serverful concept in a serverless product? So it was a bit of back and forth, so we entered today Fargate Spot. It's fully managed, so you don't select instances. It's the same serverless operational model you have on Fargate today.
So wait, did we say what Fargate was for everybody?
No.
We have some viewers that may not have heard of Fargate.
Okay, I apologize. So Fargate,
That's okay.
Yeah, Fargate is essentially serverless compute for containers. It works with two orchestrators. The second one was added today, actually, in the keynote.
Awesome.
It always has worked with Amazon ECS, and today it works also with Amazon EKS. So that is Fargate. So it's essentially
Fargate's one of my favorite
containers.
services. I mean, who doesn't like serverless containers?
Yep.
All right,
So
so
today-
serverless spot.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
I
today the launch was spot pricing for serverless containers.
Yes, so exactly. That's Fargate Spot for you. And that's exactly what we were trying to marry two worlds, as we were trying to say.
Okay.
And we want to give customers the benefits of giving us a signal saying, hey, this application can actually tolerate interruption, but we don't want to give them the overhead of actually dealing with the instances and patching, managing, and scaling those clusters and Spot instances. And so essentially, it's a very simplified interface on how you use Fargate on Spot. It's fully managed, and you get.
I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say, when you say applications that can tolerate interruption, are there some specific use cases you have for this?
Absolutely, it's a typical use case you see on Spot. You want to go ahead, Chad, and so what do you commonly see customers use Spot for?
Sure, so general rule of thumb best practices, anything that is fault tolerant, anything that is stateless, anything that isn't storing any session state on a given instance of Fargate is a great opportunity to use Spot. So workloads, that would include things like batch processing, ETL workloads, big data, things that need an excessive amount of compute resources, but then can be interrupted or can be restarted when necessary.
Now, when you say interrupted, what happens when it's interrupted, right? Is it just killed, or do I get a chance
what
to
exactly
close out
happens
gracefully?
behind the scenes? What does it really mean?
So you get a similar control. So we took feedback from customers asking them how you would like to be interrupted.
How they would like to be interrupted?
Yeah, and we were being polite, and then we said, they said, we don't want to change our application code. So currently on containers today, there's a sig term signal, which which you get when your container is being killed, and that's the signal customers use to do their cleanup operations. So they said, give us the same signal. And give us 2 minutes to clean up, and that's why it's pretty migration friendly, so you don't have to change too much code to run on Fargate.
So you can adopt spot pricing today, even if
Yeah.
you're already running on Fargate.
Yeah, you can use Fargate Spot super simply, but you can migrate them over. Just make sure that the application can indeed tolerate interruptions. As Chad said, it should fall into one of those use cases.
What kind of price reduction do customers typically see when enabling spot pricing?
So you get up to 70% off.
Guys,
And it is,
70% off. I mean,
yeah.
it's better than Black Friday sales.
So it is dynamic pricing. It's subject to capacity availability, but it's up to 70% off.
I want that.
Yeah.
So if I'm using Fargate today, and I want to take advantage of Spot, what do I do? Do I have to rewrite anything?
So you don't have to rewrite much. Your container in your application doesn't have to be rewritten.
Okay.
All you have to tell us is, so there's two specific signals you need to give us. One is if it's all has to be run on Spot, or do you want to be mixed between Fargate and Fargate Spot? Because that was a use case. So when we worked backwards from customers' use case, they're like, there's some applications like ETL jobs that can be all on Spot. There's some applications like web services where we want to have a baseline of regular Fargate tasks, but we want to mix it up with some Spot capacity.
So I can have fixed capacity and then stretch it out.
And then you stretch it out with Spot, and that's so we've built in controls that allow you that give you that mix, and we've actually flipped it on the head a little bit by making it application first. So every service owner can thereby signal how much he or she is willing to have interrupted versus not. And or if they want to go all in on Fargate Spot on a specific use case which can actually tolerate so much interruption and have the back pressure downstream to handle that.
So we did actually get a question from the audience. Suki wants to know, does it drain the task from the load balancer, or do I have to fail health check from container manually?
It actually, the way it works is you get the term signal, you get 2 minutes timeout, you do your clean out, and then the load balance, and then
you get the signal to do the cleanup.
And then it gets killed, and then
so it gives you 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes before it actually gets killed. So you get killed, and the stop task. We send an ECS event through ECS service event to CloudWatch events.
Okay.
And you can listen to those events, and then also plan your strategies in terms of you do want to schedule more, schedule less, scale out more, scale out less. So all this is built in for you. So.
And can I switch? So if I have spot pricing enabled, and let's say my Spot instance that my container is running on goes away and it's interrupted, can I also designate for it to be respun up on an instance that I'm paying for?
Yeah, and it's not instance; it's serverless. So
right.
So I think so it depends if it's a part of an ECS
it's just
service.
Automatically going to be picked
if it's
up.
an ECS service, so you have a scheduler backing your Fargate service. And then the controls you'll see later on in the demo is you have, here's my base Fargate task I want running at all times. Here's my burst out Fargate strategy in terms of how much should be on Spot or not.
Got it.
And then the scheduler will keep trying to retry if it gets killed and reschedule those onto Fargate Spot itself.
Cool.
And try to meet your desired state.
Right.
Okay, so
really,
you mentioned demo.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to see the demo now.
Yes,
right when he said
demo.
that, I couldn't think about anything else.
Show us the demo.
Okay, sure thing.
ahead,
So I will take us through a demo here. I'm in the ECS console here, and so within this console, what I'm looking at is the clusters interface. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a new cluster. Let me just show you how easy this whole thing is. I'm going to choose the networking only because I really just want to start with a raw networking construct. We will call this Launchpad cluster. I will give it a name tag of Launchpad cluster. And what I'm doing here is this particular cluster is going to be designated for our web applications. And these web applications are designed at this point to run on Fargate or Fargate Spot. So we can take advantage of a baseline amount of Fargate tasks, and then we can allow it to scale up using Fargate Spot to optimize both performance and cost at the same time. So what I'm going to do here is, I actually will call this a web app here, just so we're clear.
That's a good idea.
Yep, thank you.
So just so everyone's clear, we're going to have a base capacity for our web app, and then use Spot to add capacity when we need it and when it's available.
Yep.
Yes, we add tasks.
Yep, so we'll do that. So first of all, we've created
now we have a cluster.
We have a new cluster. What we can do is we can now simply update the cluster. Once we go to the update cluster section, we have the ability to add a capacity provider. In this case, we have two capacity providers. One is Fargate Spot, and one is Fargate. So the first, I'll add Fargate Spot. I will then add a second one, which is Fargate. Now, really nifty here. This is the concept of what we'll call keep the lights on, right? So we can say we want a base amount of capacity, a base amount of serverless Fargate to power the workload. And I'm going to do that by providing a base of 1, which means the first task that gets provisioned will land on Fargate. Everything else above that will be a mix of both Fargate Spot and Fargate as it scales up and scales down in reactions to whatever I tell it to scale up and scale down on. Okay, so that's all I have to do to enable Fargate Spot.
And this is just a pause here. So this is something which we were talking about, having controls at the application level, because usually this was done when we spoke with customers. There are teams that operate the clusters and the teams that operate the application. And then there's back and forth in terms of how much can be mixed.
Yep.
And there was a little bit of churn in the process because a cluster on Fargate is essentially empty, it's serverless. It's like a namespace. So essentially you can consider this as a web app namespace. And the application owner is saying, this is my Fargate, this is my application, I control the availability. So I have full control to say how much runs on Fargate and Spot. So I get that levers to me as the application owner.
Yep. So adding on to that, customers typically come to us and say, we have a centralized platform for running our web applications or our infrastructure that our internal customers then use to provision their applications. This is so easy now. I have a mechanism to allow them to not worry about what they're provisioning on. I'm providing them a serverless platform. They simply say, here's my web application. Please go launch it. And Fargate and Fargate Spot will take care of launching this appropriately across both Fargate and Fargate Spot to optimize the performance and the cost on behalf of our customers. So next thing we'll do is we can now go back. We can see that we have now 2 capacity providers powering our cluster. And this cluster, again, has been designated for our internal customer for the web app. And remember, there's no cost for creating a cluster itself. You only pay for the resources.
On ECS,
on
yes.
ECS, yep. So next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and create a new service, right? So I'll click Create Service. I'm going to choose from a task definition that I've already created called Fargate Web App. I will use the latest revision. I will give this a service name called Fargate Web App 5 because I've tried this a few times earlier.
Before, right? Yeah.
Yep. I'm going to ask for 4 tasks. And what this is going to do is launch 4 Fargate tasks, and it will balance it between the base of Fargate, and then it will use Fargate Spot to scale it up as necessary across the additional 3 that it launches. So everything else here, I will provide one further here, Fargate Web App. For the tag, we'll click Next. Here we can go and tell it which VPC to use. A couple of options here to choose. One thing to remember, because we are asking Fargate to use spare capacity, we're asking it to look in as many subnets availability zones as possible. Yeah. I will ask it to use a couple of security groups here to allow access into my web app. Finally, I will head down to the bottom. Everything else I'm going to leave alone. It's very easy to do. Next. I won't enable service auto-scaling at this time, but you can certainly do that. And I will now click Create Service. So that's really all there is to do. So now Fargate is going to head out, start launching tasks as a part of my service, and we can go ahead and look at the service. And we can see that we now have 4 tasks that are in the provisioning state. And so we can drill into each of these if you want to add anything as I go through this.
Yeah, no. So I noticed you tagged each and every the cluster and the service. Can you tell me how that's useful for customers on tagging their resources and their ECS resources?
Absolutely. So the tags are going to play an important role in basically cost allocation. So we're going to be able to track the cost associated with this particular cluster, this particular service, this application running on a serverless environment in Fargate, and allow them, our customers, to track how much that particular service cost.
Got it.
They can take that, use the tags to say, in Cost Explorer, say, what did this application cost me? And then they can do cost allocation across their own internal resources.
Got it. So you isolated the application by cluster, so it's a clean world, and then you can immediately allocate costs. Makes sense.
Absolutely. So here we have these moving into the running state.
Let's see if those are the lucky ones that are on Fargate Spot, the running ones.
The ones that are running. Let's drill into each one. We can see that this particular one is, this task is running on Fargate.
Yeah.
We'll look at the first one here. This one is running on Fargate Spot. So now we can see we have a nice mix of Fargate and Fargate Spot within our service.
And where did you delineate how much to put on Spot and how much to? I think I missed that.
I did that in the cluster configuration. So when I go on Update Cluster, I give a base and a weight to each of the capacity providers.
Okay.
And that's all I have to do. And Fargate is going to figure out how much to allocate from a service and task perspective onto each of these capacity providers.
Yep. So you can do it by use case, right? You can have an ETL cluster, which is totally interruptible, and you can probably be really opportunistic on Spot there by not even having a base.
Yep.
Right.
I can create a new cluster, and let's go ahead and do that now. Let's create a cluster that is designated purely for Fargate Spot. So we'll call this one ETL.
Do you see customers running 100% on Spot from your experience?
Absolutely. So many customers will take advantage of the fact that their applications are fault tolerant, they're interruption tolerant, and they're able to basically submit jobs into a job queue, some sort of an ETL queue, and allow those jobs to be processed. And if one gets interrupted, the job will be rescheduled and retried, and they're perfectly fine that way. So I'm going to give this one a name of ETL. And what I'll do here with this cluster is I will simply provide a single capacity provider, being Fargate Spot. That's all I have to do. Nothing else to set. Now
And then that's it. All of it's on Spot.
Yep.
All of it's on Spot, yeah.
Every task or service that I launch onto this cluster is going to be running pure on Fargate Spot, and I put that tag there so that every resource that gets launched through this will have that tag, and I can do cost allocation that way. Let's go ahead and launch some tasks on this here. I'll do run task. I'm going to check running this on the cluster default strategy. I'll use the task definition here. Let's go ahead and ask for 10 tasks to launch. I'll put this into my VPC with my subnets. Everything else looks great to me. Name for a tag is our ETL job. And let's run task. There we go. So
I'm running.
if I come down here and I look at my tasks, I've got 10 tasks that are spinning up. If I drill into any of them, you can see that the capacity provider for these is Fargate Spot. So I'm saving up to 70%.
Nice.
It's handling everything for me. I don't have to worry about anything. I've got my tags applied. I know anything I launch on this cluster will go onto Fargate Spot. And Fargate, being a serverless managed service, will take care of everything for me.
That's pretty
Where
cool.
can our customers go to learn more about Fargate Spot pricing?
So they can check out our Fargate pages. It's all live. So you can just go to awsfargate.com/prices. You just Google Fargate.
AWS.
Just-
What was it?
just do Fargate pricing.
Yep.
Fargate.
Yeah. And then you can hit pricing.
So while
you
we're
should
talking
see
about pricing,
pricing right there.
does
There you
this
go.
Got it.
does this integrate with the savings plan that we launched a few weeks back?
Yeah, so savings plan is the way to think about this is addition to savings plan. Savings plan is slightly orthogonal. It's meant for applications that run continuously. But the way we arrived at launching 3 pricing innovations this year, we dropped our prices in January, and now we have savings plan and Spot. Because customers wanted to, move applications of a diversity of use cases. One is applications that run all the time, those are the web applications, versus the ETL jobs that have an up-down cycle. So then they opportunistic and run on Fargate Spot. They want to run all these applications on Fargate and just completely, benefit from serverless compute as much as they can.
Yep.
So that's
Makes
why
sense.
we kind of gave them these 3 levers to unblock and say, hey, welcome to Fargate.
Cool.
We got a question here from LeCube Dude. Will Fargate EKS support Spot instances?
So EKS on Fargate is not supported as of now. We have an item on our roadmap, GitHub roadmap, which we just which we added. So you can track where Fargate Spot or when Fargate Spot supports EKS as well. It's currently supported for Amazon ECS today.
Got it.
I just wanted to point out how cheap this is. So we're looking at 1.2 cents per vCPU hour with
Yes.
Fargate Spot. I think it's
Wow.
amazing. Customers have been asking for this for a while,
Yeah.
and happy to say it's here. So really excited about all the use cases.
Yeah, I'm pumped.
It's a really cool launch.
Yeah.
Yep.
Congratulations,
Yeah,
guys.
congrats, guys. Okay, well, I think we are about out of time. So with that, thanks
We'll
for
be
joining
back
us.
with
We'll be
plenty more
back.
content till the end of the day. We'll see you guys shortly. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you.